Hi everybody, welcome back. And we're going to talk about Hello, Mary Lou, and I want to talk about the difference. There's a slight differences between how you feel comedy and horror. And there's a little trinkets of this movie that if you change it, it could have been a comedy. Or there's little trinkets that you give me be more of a horror movie. So this is my emphasis today, that some things can be, this actually felt almost, it could have been a comedy.
I think it's accidentally comedic, and I also feel like it's accidentally horrific. I feel like every thing that works in the film is accidental almost, where it was like we didn't intend for this scene to be creepy, but it is. We didn't intend for this one to be funny, and it is. And I just don't know where it is. But the movie was half reshot by its own screenwriter, so we can really deep dive into the mess that became the brilliance that became the underrated Prom Night 2. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hey, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We are both members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out the webpage for other critics' reviews as well as ours. Today we're going to talk about, since we kind of delve into Canadian horror a little while back in the early 80s, we have to, of course, go through one that's 35 years old now. Which is Prom Night 2, which is is it a sequel? I don't know.
I've got a whole thing for it, man. I'm wild on it right now. So, Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. 30 years ago, Mary Lou Maloney died tragically at her prom. Now, decades later, the spirit of the past has returned to take vengeance on the seniors of Hamilton High, and Vicky Carpenter must face the horrors of the previous generation.
What I'm saying is, there's certain elements of shots where it seems like, am I supposed to laugh? But it's almost like the exterior shots of just showing the building, dun dun dun. Almost kind of shot like how they did in Strange Brew too. But it's almost like Frankenstein meets Costello. It's horrific, but you can get away with sometimes because it's sometimes funny.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to the unintentionality of the whole thing, because Bruce Pittman, the director, did not have a lot of credits to his name, especially at the time he made this film, even past this film. But then
he's kind of green.
Yeah, you also have Ron Oliver, who was a screenwriter of both this film and the follow-up, Prom Night 3. Which is the only other film to feature Mary Lou Maloney. Ron Oliver wrote the screenplay, had never directed before, but he was given $100,000, I believe, to reshoot half the movie and fix up a lot of the issues that are there. And so the question is, who made the issues, really? Like, was it a Pittman issue and then Oliver fixed it, or did Oliver kind of mess up a good movie? It's all kind of in the mixture there. Seems like there was some communication with Wes Craven from the crew as to how to make the film better. They asked for his guidance. One of the people on the crew knew him, and he said, give him some scares, give him a hard-on, and send him home. That probably ended up happening.
Because in the movie, there's a lot of references of characters' names, of Wes Craven, you have John Carpenter, you have, they also reference a lot of Carrie. They actually more reference The Exorcist, but I see a lot more Carrie in this movie than I think they want to admit.
The bones of the film are very Carrie-like. Right, it could have just
she
easily not
prom
been
queen, and
because Mary Lou could have literally just been Vicky Carpenter. Could have just been her instead of channeling the past, channeling something within her, and then it's essentially the same movie. It's one of those ones that's kind of lost in trying to figure out what kind of a movie we're going to do. Better or worse.
And then at the time, a lot of nostalgia from that period, because we critique Night of Creeps, a lot of nostalgia 50s. And I think they try to encapsulate a little too much the emphasis of let's try to get as much 50s. When you look at it now, it's so much what 80s thinks the 50s is, not what the 50s is in reality.
Stranger Things is what we think the 80s was today, which is not entirely what the 80s was. If you look at a lot of the documentary footage from the time, around the time, every generation kind of looks at the previous one with a slight nostalgia, and they forget what was good at the time and what was very bad. As we know, if you're making a movie in the 80s and you're trying to be nostalgic about the 50s weren't the best time if you weren't a white dude. So, we could even look at it from that kind of perspective. Going back to what you mentioned, where everyone has these last names that are like Carpenter and Craven and stuff.
Yeah, these little kernels that you're watching, I get.
Yeah, I want to start a change.org petition. I know these things don't work, but I want to start one right now. Stop naming your characters after famous directors. Granted, this was one of the
Well, this
earlier
is
films that
87,
did it.
this is
Yeah,
kind of the start
This is
of
one of
it.
the first ones that did it. But like, please stop doing it now because it's still happening today. Where there's a carpenter in every horror movie that's trying to be meta.
They
and I'm
recently
sick
do
of
that.
it.
I'm sorry, but they recently did that in the recent Scream movie.
Yeah.
Carpenter.
The only one I'll accept there is the character named Wes in recent Scream because it has a purpose to that film. But it's like every movie that does it now, I'm just sick and tired of it.
So we're a little bit salty, but I want to say I really enjoyed the movie. I really
like
enjoyed
it, yeah.
it. It's a great little popcorn flick of a movie. The balance is, it's a little off-centered, a little bit awkward, a little stiff sometimes. But it's I love about the Canadian horror. It could sometimes she gets a concussion from the volleyball. And it's almost like a comedy gag.
Yeah.
It's almost something you see from vaudeville. Like, the ball, Linda.
Yeah, you're one score away from making that a
Yeah, and then it goes into dreamland,
It reminded me a bit of how Sleepaway Camp never veered away from the comedy. That's the big difference between the two. Is Sleepaway Camp had fun with the comedy and made it basically a camp movie that happened to have a serial killer, whereas Prom Night 2 doesn't seem to be aiming for the comedy, but the comedy's unintentional and it kind of works because it's a little schlocky of a movie. The thing about it compared to the original
That's
film,
what the charm of it is.
yeah. But when I look at this one, so let's talk about Carpenter. John Carpenter made Halloween 2, didn't want to have another Michael Myers film, so he thought, when they wanted to get the idea going, he was going to produce an anthology essentially, and Halloween 3 would be a different story, Halloween 4 would be and go on and go on.
Yeah.
I think the attempt there didn't work because people love Michael Myers so much. This might be the fix to that, because essentially the Prom Night series is an anthology series.
It should attach to the Halloween kind of a...
Well, that's the thing, is they're all Prom Night movies, but only 2 and 3 are related. But each one kind of has a very separate flavor to it.
Oh,
usually
you're
a completely
citing
distinct story.
Prom Night 3, including in here.
1, 2, 3, and 4. They all kind of go around a different thing. The only thing that carries over is Hamilton High, which is actually unintentional in this film. The film was called The Horrors of Hamilton High before it was even connected. And Brock Simpson, who's an actor who's in all 4 Prom Night films, playing different characters.
Yeah.
So
Brock Simpson, who he sounds like it's somebody...
Computer nerd.
Some 80s action hero.
Yeah, and he's not action-y. A little computer heavy.
Comes up with McBain from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Brock Simpson and McBain, yes.
Exactly.
But right, that's the charm of it, is it's not a core character. It's almost a temperament.
Yeah.
A feeling, a notion, or kind of an emotion surrounded by an event that's kind of silly. Why would you take Prom Night so serious?
Yeah, but I see a lot of people who talk about oh man, they've made 12 Halloween movies. We're gonna have a 13th one this year. Haven't we done enough Michael Myers? And in a way, as a huge Halloween fan, I hope after this next Halloween film they do something anthological. They do something a little bit different with the take. What Prom Night 2 is great about is that all 4 of these movies you could watch and get a completely different movie all time, but it's all around a central holiday. This might be the greatest, holiday-themed horror franchise, purely because of its flavor text across the whole franchise. And that's what this one does, because they accidentally connected it.
And what I'm trying to say, what you really enjoy about this movie is the charmness. Is you see a lot of references of movies you've seen before. You've seen a lot of they know it. They're very aware. They talk about it, like Carrie with the priest.
Yep. Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Very much the high school films. Very much. I watched it as how did Stephen King not write this thing? Because it's very Stephen King, the family is very stiff and structured. There's no negotiation. It's constant frictions with everybody. There's a friction with everybody in this movie. And then you have the lead protagonist, which is Wendy Lyon's character, which is Vicky Carpenter. Of course, Vicky Carpenter. But her do different things when she gets possessed by Mary Lou. I like that.
I do. I really enjoyed the fact that they kind of have a central character that is our villain and our hero in some ways. I wish Lyon's performance was a little bit stronger, because I didn't really buy into much of what she was doing on the good or the possessed side
I wish
of
she did
things.
something with her hair. It's
Yeah.
kind of awful.
Mary
Lou has the best hair.
I feel like the film might have been better served had the focus character not been... she still had her same arc, but not been Vicky's character. If it had been Craig's character, Louis Ferreira, who has gone on to do Stargate shows. He was in a Saw movie. Louis Ferreira has done a lot of kind of genre stuff and a lot of TV work recently. But Craig Nordham, being the son of the principal who was directly involved in Mary Lou's death, and also be dating the woman that's now being possessed by her, I think you could have a lot of avenues with Craig of where he could be looking as a character, where his arc could go.
I agree with
And they
you.
don't
It's
really
a
go
little
there.
bit cheapened.
Yeah.
A little bit wooden, where you could have done a little more investigation with Craig's character.
Yeah, because he's
Instead
got
of
a
just-
lot of character development ability, like the potential to it. They
Right.
just don't really get there.
Just like, instead of just being your atypical 80s teenage kid named Craig with a motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a sensitivity to what Louis Freire brings to this film that I think could have made him a better lead character if the film was restructured around him. If you're going to reshoot half the movie, write some more scenes for him.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with the movie, you understand that Mary Lou perished during prom night from a prank, and the people that were responsible grow up, and one of the people is, well, Mary Lou's date at the time that she cheated on because he was so stale and boring.
Yeah.
I love it. But he becomes a principal. Bill Nordham, played by Michael Ironside. Before he chased Arnold all around on Mars, he's the principal in this movie.
Michael Ironside is the kind of guy who always surprised me when he shows up in a sequel to a movie. Just because he feels like the kind of guy who wouldn't like do sequel work. You know, that he just like would keep hitting these genre stuff, but he was in a Karate Kid sequel, he was in a Prom Night sequel, a Terminator sequel. Like I think he just like will take a role and make it
Probably
his.
why I was surprised to see him in Total Recall. It's like, it's the first movie. You're not in Total Recall 2.
Yeah. He reminds me of like I don't know how he operates as an actor in that way, but when Chris Rock was talking about getting Samuel L. Jackson to be in a Saw movie, and they were like, "How'd you convince him to do Saw 9?" And he was like, "I paid him. Like I called him on the phone and I paid him." And it's like, yeah, he probably does take a role and just make it his own. But he's great in this movie because, again, as the principal, he has to be reserved, which plays against a lot of Ironside type.
But it's effective.
That's why it's so good.
Yeah.
It's because he's the guy you expect to explode the whole film.
Yeah.
You know,
He just
you
sits-
expect
yeah.
Scanners, Ironside.
Right,
You're
right,
not
yeah,
getting it.
Right. But he just stands there and does this for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like probably the most reserved he's ever been in any movie, maybe except for Visiting Hours, where he played a serial killer who kind of did a lot of kind of like distinct breathing.
And I want to emphasize, there's a scene with the priest going to Michael Ironside's house, and that conversation in the living room is shot very amateurish. There's a lot of mistakes with that, but the whole focus is Michael Ironside.
Yep.
He still wins out, even though they had like the shot the priest and he gets viscerated, and shouting again loud. Still, it's almost you want to look at what is Michael Ironside, what is he doing? Where is he?
Yeah, that feels like a Ron Oliver shoot, just because again, first time director, never held a camera but was asked to fix the movie. It
Yeah.
feels like something he might have gotten involved in. But yeah, you're right. It's almost like his camera, thankfully, had something that it could focus on in that conversation. Because again, Richard Monette, I think he does what he can with the work as Father Cooper, the recently passed Richard Monette, and he just doesn't have much to do as a character except for like he's kind of the crazy Ralph Friday the 13th guy who's like, you're all cursed, something's coming for you, Whereas like the camera knows, let's focus on Ironside and just see what he does.
And like I said, that's another emphasis. It could have been a comedy. It's the charm of it. It's almost like, yeah.
That goes back to some of the reviews I even read from the time period that compared the film to Blue Velvet, because there's a certain amount of, I want to say like tonal insanity to how Blue Velvet operates as well, where it's like parts of it you're not sure if you're supposed to laugh at, and then be like sad that you're laughing at disturbing imagery. That's kind of how this one felt, but just to a less forced degree.
There's nothing, well, I want to, like, we critique Blue Velvet. There's deep themes to it, to the point that even the camera goes deep into the dirt.
Yeah.
When you see the insects biting, there's a lot of deep themes to that movie. And here it's very surface, which is fine.
Yeah.
There's not a really lot of deep themes to this movie. It's a popcorn flick with a lot of charm that you can just enjoy.
Yeah, it has a Lynchian style, but not really a Lynchian score or like story to it, or kind of framework.
We're not really delving into the psychology. We're just having fun being a slasher movie that the demonic person Mary Lou was coming back, and we're all condemned.
Yep. And the funny thing about now this film compared to the original film, I have this image in my head of the original Prom Night with the
one we
head.
just critiqued.
The first film. Yeah, with Jamie Lee Curtis. The first film, there's an image that is ingrained in my head. I saw it in a horror book when I was a kid, and it just sticks with me now all the time. And it's that head. The headless, head just on the walkway at Prom Night when the kid gets decapitated and they find it. And I think that is an iconic image in an otherwise mostly forgettable-ish kind of slasher
The murders
film.
are kind of forgettable in this movie.
The murders in this film, there's a lot of forgettability around the stuff that should be more memorable, like the horror elements of it. They should stay in my mind a little bit longer. But there's one kill scene that I think should rank in the pantheon of great kill scenes in this movie, and that is that really shockingly disturbing kill scene with the lockers.
Oh yeah,
when the lockers move together and crush someone inside of the locker. That is one of the not coolest effects scenes I've ever seen in a cheap horror movie. But that thing hit me like a brick, and I was like, holy, something is going down here. I think it's one of the greatest kill scenes in any horror movie ever. I was so impressed with that scene.
I agree. That was very effective, but it shows the force that Mary Lou, I don't know, is she a human being throughout the whole time? I don't think so. I think it's a demon personified as a person throughout the whole thing.
I guess we'll have to watch Prom Night 3 to find out.
Just constantly, there's no good. It's always me, which we love. She's a great villain. And I've had one harsh criticism to the movie is you don't see enough of her.
Yeah, that's true. I wish that the part when she's possessed, almost would have been a dual portrayal. It would have helped Lyon's performance, and it would have helped Lisa Schrage, who plays Mary Lou, if you had her all makeup in her really gross death makeup, maybe following behind Wendy as she's possessed.
That's what I put in my notes.
Whispering into her ear, or maybe have those moments where the camera flashes the two of them, do some strobe light effect where they flicker back and forth. Yeah. There's some cheap things you could have done because you already had the makeup effects. And all you would need is some good lighting and camera work. You could have made some really effective looking stuff on the cheap.
I think it would, even though I do enjoy the movie, it has a great charm, and I'm probably go back to watching it very quickly. Mm-hmm. But if you had the scenes of Wendy Lyon possessed by Mary Lou, Mary Lou standing back, looking gothic and very, from the burned or whatever. But she's saying the lines, and Wendy Lyon's characters repeats them.
Having her even mouthing them or
something like that. But you still get enough screen time for her. Mm-hmm. That's a great, effective way.
Yeah,
writers take note.
There's things that you could do to up the film.
You have a great character here. Keep her in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the problem is she goes missing for so long. I don't even want to call it Act 2 because after the first 10 minutes and before the last 20, there's an hour where there's stuff happening that it's developing and there is a story building that it just isn't that prevalent, but it is a little lost searching for the Mary Lou, searching for the villain, searching for a stronger protagonist. There's just some losslessness to the film,
which is if you in this movie, if you want to reference Nightmare on Elm Street, which is effective because even when you don't have Freddy in the movie, it's still prevalent with the music and the tone of the dangers of Freddy throughout the time. And I think if you're not going to have Mary Lou throughout the whole movie, you need, even though they talk about it, you need some kind of signature thing that she's, like a ghostly possession, the things are moving, something awkward, something possessive, or you're being to school. Constantly effective. That's why. Yeah.
Well, you know what?
That was what makes it effective.
Let me throw something back at you, and I agree with you heavily. The two differences. Well, there's a lot of differences. The two major differences I can see between Prom Night 2 and Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah. First is protagonist, because again, Heather Langenkamp's protagonist is written as better. She's someone who's uncovering the mystery, and it's more fascinating as she peels back the layers. The mythology is stronger, but also, so what is maybe the most iconic death scene in Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is Johnny Depp gets pulled into a frickin' bed and then he erupts into a blood volcano. Freddy Krueger's not even in one of the most iconic death scenes in the franchise.
Affiliated, right. You believe he's
You don't see him there, but you feel him there. And again, that's a memorable death scene that doesn't even feature the killer. Looking over at Prom Night 2, again, most memorable death scene in the movie for me, lockers implode. Mary Lou really isn't involved in that a whole lot. No. So it's again, you can do it if you have strong visual horror death scenes
and
you have a strong protagonist. Yeah. If you fix both those things, Mary Lou wouldn't even be a problem not being in the film as much. But it helps if your protagonist can't carry it. So there you go.
But she's so charming as diabolical.
Yeah.
I do like that.
That's why she's the only Prom Night character to return in the sequel.
Yeah. I just like the bit of, the lady's taking time to fix the cape, and she's like, forget the cape, give me the tiara. The hell with that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And the tiara is almost supposed to be kind of a prop, kind of a Chekhov's tiara.
Well, and part of me kind of wonders, so the forcing this film into the Samuel Golden Company forced this film as a Prom Night sequel. Again, it was originally written as The Haunting of Hamilton High. So
I understand the reasoning for it.
Oh, absolutely.
You gotta,
if you own one property and you can play it, because again, Prom Night could never really have a traditional sequel. The film kind of has an ending where it's like, I don't really feel like there's much you could do with this.
but you got to understand the 80s, we're making sequels out of everything. We were so comfortable with part 2 that it just was almost a reflex.
Exactly. But then I like the fact that during reshoots, certain things were added, like the emphasis on Hamilton High. The discussion about it more often was prevalent in the reshoots, as well as using the line, "It's not who you go with, it's who takes you home," which was a reference to the original Prom Night.
Yes.
I kind of feel like it's the I have a bad feeling about this. Yeah.
God, I watched the movie.
In Star Wars, when they have I have a bad feeling about this, I feel like the Prom Night film should have used "It's not who you go with, it's who takes you home" in every single Prom
should
Night
be
film.
the underline, yeah.
So I do think there's a great template here for making a anthology horror series. Put some of those like recurring references, things that can keep coming back, but then also tell an original story. So we have Hamilton High, and we have that great line. Keep bringing that back in every single film, and you could have a Prom Night series where you bring in new directors every single year, and they create their own story around this time period.
I agree. Yeah.
Because adolescence is different for all of us, so you could have some really interesting ideas.
So even with Prom Night 2, we're saying the remake was completely unnecessary.
Yeah, because you can just tell a different story.
Just of
In many ways, that Prom Night remake is essentially Prom Night 5. It's just not very good. So
overall, what I'm saying is, watch the film. You can see different references where the thread of comedy and horror kind of shot almost the same way. You can balance it out a little bit. But like I said, if you watch Frankenstein versus Abbott and Costello, they get away with a lot more horror in that movie because it's labeled a comedy. Where if you do Frankenstein, it's the tone and temper. There's not a lot of horrific things in the movie Frankenstein as much as there are in Frankenstein versus Abbott and Costello because it's labeled a comedy. And when you shoot something like a comedy, you can sometimes get away with more horrific things in a movie, much as like this. There's the locker scene, which is just goo coming out. You're like, oh my God, that was a person.
Yeah.
Or her getting trapped in the chalkboard.
Yeah.
But when you shoot it comedic and almost have a comedic temperament sometimes with it, you can get away with a lot more with the censorship of it. It's a selling market thing.
Looking at the Abbott and Costello of it all, because you have that there. Abbott and Costello is a horror movie with 2 comedic characters. Everything not Abbott and Costello is horror, and it's treated as such. Yeah. And I think that's a smart thing that you could take decades later and use in almost any movie. That Get Out, for example, a recent film, has our TSA agent is a comedic character in a horror film. It's like that injects some comedy without taking the horror out of the film. Whereas again, this film, unintentional comedy where you're not sure if you're supposed to giggle or laugh, does kind of mess with it a little bit.
The family at dinner is shot like almost like Strange Brew, where they're at dinner and they're eating the Colonel's chicken and we're gonna pray.
Yeah, but like Brock Simpson's character in this film, playing the computer nerd, he could have been your comedic character in a horror film where everything else around him is treated as horror, but he injects a little bit of lightheartedness and then disappears for a couple scenes. You could have done it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you can attach a loose thread to this, an anthology of just having a loose, doesn't have to be constrictive, a really tight one, but a loose thread of prom nights, and you can balance. You can explore.
Yeah,
put it in space for God's sake.
I would be so excited to see Prom Night 35 coming out in May. Like, I mean, that would be just like Prom Night every year. Just
Prom
bring
Night
me another.
Space. Just have it in a space station. What the hell?
Yeah. If Leprechaun can do it, so can Mary Lou.
Jason Voorhees can go to space.
Yeah. So overall, I do think. I grew up with the original Prom Night. There's always a nostalgic level to me. I think this film edges it out, but only slightly. I still think both films are incredibly flawed, but enjoyable messes.
I agree.
But I think this one just barely edges it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the charm of it, is incredibly flawed and very shot, very amateurish.
Yeah. This is the kind of movie that makes me think, like, I watched this at 6 a.m. on Saturday, and I was thinking to myself, I should go make some popcorn. Because that's the kind of movie I had, was wanting to watch it. I was like, I should make popcorn at 6 a.m. so I can watch it.
And it's kind of weird, a movie that was nostalgia about the 50s, but now we're nostalgia about it for the 80s. So, have you seen Prom Night 2? Hello, Mary Lou.
Let us know your thoughts on the film down below. And again, is it better than the original Prom Night? Did this franchise really fix the anthology format and just no one realized? Let us know down in the comments your thoughts about the film. Should we cover Prom Night 3? I've got that movie wrapped up in plastic ready to go. So let us know your thoughts on the film and where we should go next with our discoveries of Prom Night horror and anthological horror.
We can go everywhere.
So and while you're down checking out those comments section, please like and subscribe. 2 free things that you can do. They support the channel immensely, and they help make sure you never miss new episodes of the show as they drop. Please check out that Patreon link down in the description as well,
Please
where
do.
you can get our Picks with Kyle and Nick episode. Last month we did top 5 Alfred Hitchcock films. This month we're doing something fun. We're doing a revisit of our favorite personal items.
Physical.
Yeah,
Physical personal
especially when you're looking at things like HBO Max imploding, maybe physical media might be the right way to go. So come back and check out Picks
Kyle
with
just
Kyle
wants
and
me
Nick.
to get hurt going down the basement in the storage and looking for things.
I just want the stuff you don't want. And don't forget, too, we also have exclusive Patreon-only episodes starting this month. You can get our access to a trip down a lane of a particular director that we're both pretty fond of as well. Check out all that stuff down in the description and join the Patreon for as low as $1 a month.
It's not Udo Kerr, is it?
Oh, no, we should do an Udo Kier thing.
God, no.
Oh, man, we should totally do that. But once again, you can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
Hey, you can find my podcast, St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. So.
Hello, Mary Lou.